Great. Thank you so much for that introduction and for having me. And yeah, it's great to see all these really cool, exciting talks today. So yeah, so I'm going to talk to you about an instrument we call AMIM for short. But what it is, it's right as the name implies, it's a microscopic imager, kind of like Watson on MSL, or I'm sorry, Molly on MSL and Watson on Mars 2020. You know, it's a microimager, but instead of just giving you a simple 3-color images, this actually combines the capability of an imaging spectrometer. And so this is, you know, the image in the background is one of a regolith sample that we took with our instrument, and we'll talk about it later. And I just briefly want to acknowledge our co-authors on this project, team members, as well as, you know, funding from DALI. Okay, next slide, please. Yeah, so as I mentioned, right, AMIM combines the capabilities of microimager, but with an imaging spectrometer. So think of M-cube, but at the microscale, multispectral. And so there's a lot that you can do with that, right? Mapping minerals up close. And so you can use that not only for understanding mineralogy with microtexture, right? So kind of sort of almost doing sort of petrology, right? Petrography, kind of like with a thin section microscope, but also really useful for like resource prospecting, right? Especially because this instrument, we've developed it to go all the way out to 3.6 microns to be able to detect the presence of water. And so the way the instrument works, right? So if you see the image on the right, right, which is kind of a sort of artist rendition of the instrument, right? Kind of in the nutshell, sort of the idea is if you imagine AMIM deployed at the end of a robotic arm, kind of looking at just like the microscopic imagers on the rovers, right, being deployed to look at the regolith up close, and then being able to, you know, extract an image cube that you can then extract spectra to generate members. And so AMIM, because we have bands all the way from the UV out to the mid-wave infrared, we can detect a wide variety of minerals, whether it's, you know, iron-bearing minerals, hydrated minerals, as well as ices. And so you can do a lot of, you know, really valuable sciences, whether you're understanding the geology of the landing site or near the rover, right? Looking at physical properties, regolith properties, effects of space weathering, but also, for example, looking at ices. And so the way the instrument works, if you kind of on the bottom left, right? So this is kind of your quad chart, right? So the instrument consists basically of LED arrays, adjustable focus mechanisms that allows us to image both near and far, as well as an IR camera that allows us to, you know, so use one detector. So most spectrometers, right, over this really broad spectral range use 2, but our engineers were able to design so that we can just use one set of optics, one set of detector. And so with at closest proximity, right, we can image things with 30 microns per pixel. And, you know, system right now is a TRL5, but by the end of the summer, we'll be at TRL6. So next slide. Okay, this just give you a sense of the amount of, you know, the wavelengths that we have with narrow band passes, you know, kind of like 10, 20 nanometers, kind of in the near infrared, mid-wave infrared about 50. Next slide. And so if you just like looking at library spectra, right, convolved to the band passes, we can see a wide variety of minerals, whether you're dealing with igneous like olivine, low calcium, high calcium pyroxenes, oxides, right, ices, for example, like water ice, CO2 ice. Next slide. Also, a wide variety of hydrated minerals, right? Maybe not so much relevant for the moon, but definitely for like Mars or small bodies or even, you know, other planets. Next slide. And then, of course, like I said, we put a lot of bands around the 3 micron to really be able to kind of sort of tease out whether you're dealing, for example, with different kinds of flavors, for example, of water, where you're dealing with like hydroxyl, molecular water, or water ice. But of course, that also enables you to detect a variety of different sort of volatiles. Next slide. And even as well, because we have bands, right, there's absorption features around, for example, like the 3.4 micron feature, 2.3, right? We can also detect the presence of organics, right? We're not quite like Raman to tell you what specific organic it is, but we can, you know, it's very useful, especially if, for example, like maybe there might be organics in the, you know, these polar deposits in PSRs. Next slide. So yeah, so this is kind of images of the instrument, right? So you see kind kind of in the left, right, image of the sort of the LED arrays looking down at the sample. Then you have our focus mechanism, right, with optics, and then sort of our visible infrared camera. And this is just kind of images showing the instrument acquiring images of a sample, right, lighting LEDs, and it just builds your image cube sequentially. Next slide. Yeah, so these are just some examples of data that we've collected with the instrument. So this is one, for example, of a regolith sample collected from the Kauai Desert in Hawaii, right, that has really cool textures and diversity in the mineralogy. So the image on the left is one taken sort of simulating, natural color, right, with red, green, and blue. And you can see sort of the texture, but also see some items, like iron oxides kind of in the bottom left, olivine potentially on the upper left. But by going out further into the IR, we really start sort of taking advantages of that, spectral range and being able to distinguish sort of diversity of the mineralogy we can see. Next slide. Another example, this is one, actually Apollo regolith sample from Apollo 14, Apollo 14-259. This is kind of a collected from sort of the Apollo Frau Morrow formation, I thought. This is a regolith that's kind of a high maturity regolith that is, you see on the left, right? It's looks very dark, right? I mean, you can pick out potentially the plagioclase feldspar, with the high albedo, but that's kind of it with the visible camera. By going further out into the IR, you really starts teasing out, seeing that spectral diversity. And if you go to the next slide, yep, keep going. There you go. And so we can extract ROIs or draw ROIs around each of the different grains and extract spectra from that. And so we can see that just within this small little patch, right, there's a huge variety of diversity in the mineralogy, right? Whether you see, you have grains of like low calcium, high calcium pyroxenes, also olivine, plagioclase feldspar, and even, you can see agglutinates as well, right? And so which, if you had just your typical point spectrometer, right, all of those minor phases would just kind of be, you might get maybe one or two phases, minerals from that spectrum. So, but by having this all at the microscale, right, we can really sort of get at not only the major phases, but also the very minor phases that are present in the regolith, and that otherwise we would have missed it. Next slide. And then this one is actually even kind of looking towards the poles, right, the South Pole. So this is actually a lunar highlands regolith simulant, right? So this is LHS1, which is a sort of an exolith general sort of highland simulant. That's a bulk sample, about 1 millimeter in sizes or less. And we mixed it with water ice that we made in a special lab setting that allows us to really control the grain sizes of the regolith. And so we mixed it with grain sizes of less than 250 microns. And so you see on the left, right, there's really, you can't tell the difference between sort of, due to the high albedo of the materials, right, you can't really distinguish between the water ice and the regolith, especially since they're mixed, right? They kind of, especially the regolith clumped with the ice, and so they really kind of mix together. But by going out to that really wide, longer mid-wave infrared bands, we can really start teasing out where those water ice, right? And even if it's mixed with the regolith, you can see the water ice that looks kind of deep blue. And so if you go for the next slide, there you go. And so we have these ROIs. I don't know if you can see them on the screen here. Okay. Where, for example, like the green and red ROIs, right? Those are spectra, and you see, I kind of try to label for folks, right, where you see clear absorption features associated with water ice, right, at 1.5, 2 microns, and especially that really big, broad, 3 micron feature around kind of 3.1. And then, but of course, the really cool part is that we even saw this sample has less than 1% by weight of olivine and pyroxene, and with the image, with the instrument, we were able to tease out or even pick out, kind of looking at a needle in a haystack, pick out sort of olivine sample grains as well as the pyroxene grains, which you see there in the blue and magenta spectra. Next slide. Okay, so just to kind of close, AMIM, like I said, it's it's an instrument that we hope for, could be applicable for future planetary missions to the moon, but also for other missions to other planets, and really kind of combines the capabilities of a microscope with an imaging spectrometer at the microscale. It takes just a few minutes to acquire, less than a few minutes to acquire an image cube. So, that enables, especially for rover missions, right, or things that you're moving quickly, right, enables sort of hypothesis-driven exploration, right, very quick turnaround. And combining mineralogy and microtexture is really powerful, right? It not only gives you the sense of the texture, mineralogy, what's the relationship with what kind of compositions dealing with, but also if you're identifying very minor phases. Again, the instrument consists of illumination, so we can operate both in daylight and in shadowed regions, right? So it gives us a lot of flexibility. And then, of course, we have adjustable focus, so we can focus in a, we don't for imaging. And so this instrument allows you to not only do textural information, mineralogy, but also really enables to do operation in a wide variety of environments. And then, of course, because it's low mass and power, right, allows you to be deployed, whether it's on a robotic arm, belly of a small rover, or even like a glove box, right, for something that astronauts can use in a space habitat. And so it's very powerful that enables really to identify the most valuable samples that you can then either sample, right, to bring back to Earth or analyze later with, like, say, with an XRD or something later. Thank you very much. Next slide. I think that's it. Oh, yeah. Next slide. Yeah. Thanks so much.